Welcome to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast, brought to you by your friends at Finding Balance. I'm your host, Chrissy Kirkman. On this show, we kick it as old school as it gets with how God created us to live, free from dieting, food rules, and body shame. Ready to replace the old soundtrack of cultural lies with biblical truth? Let's start with this. You don't have to be trapped by food struggles. You were created to be free. God adores you and wants you to experience the fullness of life without body hatred or bondage to dieting. The time is now to take a step toward the life you were created for. We're so glad you're here with us today. Let's get into today's episode. We all need relationships we can rest in, and we need people who are willing to sit with us in the dirt and the pain and just be with us in our journey. Do you have someone who is truly glad to be with you no matter the season? For me, one of those people is Josi Wahlert. We've never met in person, but I've experienced true growth and healing because God brought her into my life earlier this year. So what does it look like to connect heart to heart online? I pray after listening to this episode that you will have a better picture and feel safe enough to show up as your real self and be present and willing to hold space in the community that Jesus is leading you to. Hey, Josi, welcome to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm so glad you're here. It's going to be so much fun. When I think of the title, Safe, Seen, and Known, Feeling Comfortable in Online Spaces, that could really terrify some people. I was like, we're saying a lot in that title because online spaces, like what we're asking you to do is show up with a whole bunch of strangers from across the world sometimes, people you don't know. And the expectation is that you're just going to tell all the things or open up and be raw and real and transparent. And it's a lot. And it can happen well. God can do really big things in these online spaces. As we know, like it was happening before COVID in 2020. And it looks different now than it used to. So we're going to go through, unpack a lot of things, learn. If you are listening to this and you are like, I don't feel safe in online spaces. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be known. Leave me alone. Thank you for being here and just listening and being curious about what could it look like? What could it be like? So that's what we're talking about today. Josi, I want to just start out by telling everybody a little bit about you. So Josi is a professional coach, a ranch wife, and a homeschool mama living on the plains of northeastern Colorado. She loves to talk whole brain health, books, Enneagram, and more books. She's a book girl. Josi is on a continual personal journey of trauma healing, and her work is simply inviting others to take healing steps in their own stories. She is grateful to Jesus for his pace as he walks with us. Growth is life. I love that. Growth is life.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So I know you've heard the podcast before. We start off with a kickoff of a question of what old school item or experience do you miss from back in the day? Now, full disclaimer, I was schooled. I'm talking, oh, did that happen back in 2005? She's like, you didn't say it, but you're like, I was wearing Pampers back then. I had no idea your age. So you're so much more mature. Let's just go. So answer that question for me, whatever old school means to you.
I just had to laugh. Yes, that is such a subjective term when you're born in 1995. I'm not even 30 yet, but I was surprised actually to realize how many things feel old school. And the thing that really comes up for me is a movie rental store. That used to be like the height of the sleepover with your bestie, especially one girlfriend I had. We'd go to the store, you wander, you go look for like the perfect movie for your girls' night, and you grab the nasty stained little like chip that goes with the cover, and you take the chip up and then they give you the DVD or whatever. And oh, those were the days. Now you just scroll through Netflix and pick something, and the whole experience part is gone. So I know for a lot of people, that's not super old school, but for the baby in the room, yes.
Yeah, no, I feel like it is old school. And the endless scrolling to try to find something. I'm telling you, my husband and I will be like, let's find a movie. I'm not kidding. reality is 40 minutes of searching. He and I are so frustrated. I'm feeling guilt and shame because I can't just pick a movie. He's like, whatever you want. But then I feel, this is for real. I feel this pressure that if I select the movie and it's junk, by the end of it, we're like, we'll never get that hour and a half back. And it's all my fault. Like, that's what I think. And it's like, if someone hasn't recommended something like highly and the reviews aren't really high. And I think that could have been a struggle back in the day, but for some reason it didn't seem so hard. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, that was part of the fun was the search. And now it's like,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's so many things that I think should come back, and Blockbuster Video is one of them.
Yes.
All right. So when we're talking about food issues, like there's a lot of struggles. People have been through trauma. People have been through really hard things. People are walking around carrying shame from childhood, from a few months ago, a couple days ago. It's baggage, and we don't know what to do with it because we're afraid oftentimes that if we open up and share and someone sees that side of us or sees that truth or that thing that happened, and then they start to know, like we're letting them in, what are the consequences? Like in our minds, we're creating these outcomes just like it's going to be my fault because we can't pick a movie. Like that's high level, and will they reject me? Will they look at me differently? Will they go tell someone else what I just told them? How can I really trust them? How can I feel safe? And that's what we're struggling with in general. But when you talk about food issues, eating disorders, disordered eating, 8 out of 10 people with an eating disorder don't even seek treatment. 8 out of 10. It's really hard to show up. We live in isolation with these issues. So many women who come through Finding Balance have been living with this and not even telling their own husband about it. Their family doesn't know. Maybe their family suspects, but doesn't really know the trauma, the struggle, the things that they've gone through. And 75% of women report that they have disordered eating. 91% of women are unhappy with their bodies. And there's lots of statistics that we could talk about, but it's a real issue. It's really tough. So just to kind of lay that foundation, Josi, would you just share some of your story and your background? Because I know that you've been through a lot and God has really helped you come through so many difficult things. So whatever you feel comfortable sharing, please share.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this was a really beautiful time of preparation. I've just got to say, revisiting so many things and letting go of so many things. There's been so much shame around, I would, in my story, sort of put like self-harm and the disordered eating in the same kind of bubble. And I've noticed that's not the popular parts of the story that people really want to hear. So even with the work that I do, this is still pretty new for me to even be sharing. And, as I was preparing, I wasn't terrified. And so I've just got to start with that. Healing is feels so wonderful.
Yay.
Yeah. Of course, being born in 1995, I grew up in the diet fad. Everything has to be, ultra low fat kind of culture. And so in reference to, I just want to say my biological mother, I don't blame the person for these things. I really feel like she was another victim of the culture. Because as a young child, I was dragged along to Weight Watchers and to Curves and just watched her really bemoan and belittle her physical body and, never saw her speak well of her body or herself really that I can even remember. But I remember even being in kindergarten, we had a beach day. And in the Midwest, that means we brought in a little kiddie pool and filled it with sand and played with the toys. And we wore our swimsuits inside the classroom.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. And I remember wearing a 2-piece swimsuit. And in my school, we had the kindergarten classroom. And then right across the hallway was the kindergarten bathrooms. And I remember seeing my adorable little 6-year-old belly and feeling so fat. And mortified at the idea of walking into that classroom full of kids with my swimsuit on because I was just so ugly and hideous. And, that was the same timeline that I also, trigger warning, experienced some childhood sexual assault from a family member who, when I brought this up to what should have been a safe adult, was told I was lying and made to apologize to the perpetrator, and, was thrust into this world of massive, insecurity in myself, but then even who I could trust, who was a safe adult, who wasn't a safe adult. All of this stuff was just cycling. And I remember just from day one of even kindergarten feeling so other and less than and large. And I started to display childhood bulimic behaviors, but I also did have some stomach issues and chronic issues beginning to show up as well. So all of the disordered eating behaviors that I displayed were completely masked under these health issues that I was experiencing. And so I got away with so much. But I remember being so hungry for quality time and attention, I just started making myself throw up in early elementary school, often, constantly. And it brings up for me now as an adult, did some of these chronic issues, I've had multiple stomach surgeries by now as an adult, did those things crop up because I was one of the many that, was born with the hernia and all of these things? Or was there maybe not much of an issue to start with, and these trauma behaviors that I was displaying, did that create all of these problems for me? Like, I think there's probably a little bit of both there, but oh my goodness, I've never, as a mother, just never wanted to see that for my kids, because I became known, especially by middle school, as the girl who could just lean over and throw up. So I had diagnoses of like a hiatal hernia and GERD and some different, reflux problems. And so, of course, she's constantly vomiting. She can't help it. Or can she?
Yeah. Hey, I want to take just a moment to thank those of you who are supporting us. Finding Balance is a donor-funded nonprofit ministry that operates month to month by the generosity of our friends, our staff, and our board of directors who are faithful, generous supporters. Our entire team loves to give to this ministry. If you've been blessed by the podcast or another Finding Balance resource or offering and would like to join our giving family by giving to our year-end fundraising campaign, head to findingbalance.com/donate. There, you can learn more about our initiatives that will enable us to help more women find Jesus in the middle of their struggles with food and body image. And you can give a gift that will help the ministry move into what God is doing next in 2025 and beyond, and help keep this podcast going. I am so grateful for you, so grateful for your support and your listenership. Thank you so much for being here.
There was just a lot of masking to leave that there. And we grew up in a home, constantly a new diet, but I remember in that same vein as an elementary student having sleepovers at my friend's house, and they had the bench storage seating in their kitchen area, and their mom bought them the fruit snacks that had smiley faces on them. And I remember waiting until this girl would go to sleep and sneaking into their kitchen so I could get all of the fruit snacks. So I was really good at sneaking and hiding and all of these things from a really young age. And as I got older, my story involves, I had a pretty toxic home life with my biological family, just a lot of narcissism, a lot of gaslighting, some ick stuff. And if you can believe it, I began stepping into self-harm behaviors when I was about 13, and had this very distinct moment of, intellectually, I just knew I was stepping into a space that I was not going to be able to step back out of. And I just remember having this very visceral, like, I am going somewhere that's going to change my life forever. And, still had all of these closet eating things, had stepped into a really constant space of self-harm. And at one point I tried to join like an online forum or online support group, and just made it so much worse. There wasn't any structure to these support groups. It was just other people like myself, and we were all dealing with these problems and, just kind of circulating in the problems. And there wasn't any kind of structure or support to help step out of the problems. And I didn't have the support I needed at home. I didn't have the support in, church spaces for me meant closet abuse and male church leaders who would snap your bra straps and make extremely inappropriate comments. And I just didn't have really any spaces that felt relationally safe and spaces where I could really be vulnerable with the things I was going through that I really didn't even fully understand. I just knew that I was not okay, and I was trying to utilize some sort of tools, and they were the destructive tools and didn't help me. Fast forwarding from that, again, if you can imagine, like there's so many, stereotypical paths that I walked down and was looking for love, was looking for companionship. My self-worth was in the toilet, entered into this really ugly relationship with an older boy, with just experienced a lot of sexual assault within that relationship, a lot of spiritual abuse, just ick, and dove headfirst into anorexic behaviors. With my stomach stuff, I was placed on paleo diets here, or, all the frees, the gluten-free, the dairy-free, the soy-free, all the things which did nothing but exasperate the anorexia. I was, really, again, masking or blaming on the medical problems or whatever, and just very, very minimal eating, if anything, and felt so much guilt and shame even over that much. And I shouldn't even be eating that much. And I'm sure if anyone listening, I would take the self-hatred showers. I remember just in so many different facets, just trying to scrub away the dirty off my body and never being able to, and just feeling so raw in the shower even. Just, and I felt really hopeless. And, and there was, different things going on to different traumas and, scenarios and situations. But that was just the space that I was in for so long. And at 17 years old, I met real Jesus, not toxic church culture Jesus, not shame Jesus, but I know all parts of you. And I'm glad to be with all parts of you. And I'm not angry at you. In fact, I fiercely love all parts of you, Jesus. I meant that Jesus. Yeah. And, again, felt really alone in all the struggles. But the first step for me was writing down what they were. I couldn't say it out loud. Some of the things that I had done to myself and some of the things that had been done to me, I couldn't even whisper, but I wrote them down and just saw them and sat with those things and, decided in my left brain that I was really sick of hurting all the time and hurting myself. And I was really sick of being hungry all the time, but thin enough never of the time. And I wanted that, the John 10:10, like the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come to give you life to the fullest measure or in abundance. And I had, grown up in, Sunday schools and different things. And I knew scripture enough to go, if this is what real Jesus is like, and this is what he wants to offer me, like, I don't even have a grid for what that might be. I just know this isn't it.
Yeah.
Without even knowing how to express it, I wanted that honey, sweet, sticky love of real Jesus that, seeps into all those little cracks and crevices that I wasn't even fully aware existed, let alone could ask for help for.
Yeah.
It wasn't all better immediately. It didn't just I met Jesus and now all of these problems and shame issues and stuff, they didn't just go away. They still try to have a loud voice that, there's a continual healing process and attuning to self process. but I was ready to be open for whatever Jesus might have for me. And I was doing that still in a space of feeling so alone. And it was around that time that I met my soon-to-be husband and just clicked. He was so spontaneous and adventurous and bubbly and fun and all of these things that I, again, had no grid for. And I was very, very left brain. I'm an Enneagram 5, if that means anything. And so really living in that fear, the world is intrusive, nobody's safe, and that's the other side you mentioned earlier, like stepping into an online space. Am I going to be safe? Am I going to feel shame? And the other side of that for me was, are you going to use this to attack me if I'm vulnerable with it and if I share it? I just felt like I was going to be hurt.
Hey there, I'm so grateful that you are here and listening to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast. As always, you can find helpful links from today's episode in the show notes. I want to personally thank those of you who make this podcast possible. For over 20 years, Finding Balance has been helping people walk in freedom by finding Jesus in their struggles with food and body image. If you'd like to join others in supporting this ongoing work, you can do so in one of 3 ways. 1, leave a comment and review for the podcast on your preferred podcast app. 2, share the podcast with your network and friends on social media or via text and email. 3, this podcast is made possible because of generous donors. If you'd like to make a tax-deductible donation or become a monthly supporter, you can do so at findingbalance.com/donate. Our key scripture, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Galatians 5:1.
And so I need to retreat as deeply into myself as possible and not let anything in because everything is painful. And then I see this dude who's like fun and energetic. And it was like, again, that same kind of intuitive, I knew when I met him that he was my person. And largely in my unhealed trauma self, I viewed my soon-to-be husband as my ticket out of my home life. So I got married at 18. We had only been dating for a few months. Stereotypically or statistically, with what my story looks like, and then getting married so young and so quickly, I should be in a very different place in life that statistically would have been really unhealthy or would have gone downhill. And I had no relational skills, no coping tools that were healthy. Our relationship was just kind of a mess at that point. Had been told we're never going to have children biologically, all of these things. I had done some more medical treatments that made me gain a significant amount of weight in a significantly short amount of time. And, the real healing for me didn't start until we had our 2 miracle babies. And I started asking myself, my oldest was born in 2016. My youngest was born in 2019. And I started asking myself, what do I want for their story? If they came to me with some of my childhood experiences and said, Mommy, this just happened, what would that even look like? Or like, I don't even want to put them in situations where that might even be a possibility, or, still very fear driven, but I just began examining, what do I want for them? Because I don't want for them what I've experienced, and I don't really know what else there is. So in true 5 fashion, the Enneagram 5 is the researcher, the brain, knowledge seekers, knowledge hoarders. I started researching. I came across a term called intuitive eating, which really clicked with me, because even in a lot of healed spaces, you see a lot of diet culture. We're not perpetuating disordered eating, but this is the diet plan for you. And this is how you need to be. And with intuitive eating, for me, it was, you're relearning how to do what you naturally know how to do as a child, and that is listen to your own body's signals. And if we look at children, one day they might eat, the whole fridge, the whole pantry, and seems like they're a bottomless cavern. And the next day they might want a string cheese and a, sniff of a cracker, right? And they're listening to their body, like,
Yes.
and it balances out because they have this built-in ability to go, right now I'm hungry. I want to eat. And of course, I'm talking about children who are in securely attached homes where they can be safe and, they're not early forced to, develop things that they weren't born with.
And that food is easily accessible and readily available to them.
Yes.
Also, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Like, I wanted that story for my kids. I wanted my kids to have a view of their body as like, I am wonderfully strong and comfortably fed and vibrant and energetic, and it doesn't even enter my mind that my worth might have something to do with my physical body. Understanding that culture is going to say what culture is going to say.
Yeah.
But as far as what they experience at home, like, that's the message I wanted them to have. And so I just started researching and looking, and, looking back now as I've thought about all of this, still felt so alone. And my food freedom story did not start out with freedom being the goal. My food freedom healing happened because I just didn't want that for my kids. I wanted something different for them so fiercely that I just forced myself to behave the way I wanted them to believe.
Mm-hmm.
It was a long process of me believing that actually for myself. I wanted them to have secure attachment and, just a myriad of things. And as my oldest got to be 3, 4, 5 years old, again, I just had sort of that intuitive knowing that if I want this to be their story, like, that also has to become my story. And it's not enough for me to simply behave the way I want them to believe. And, there's been a lot of therapy that has been involved in that. There's been a lot of personal research and books and podcasts and stuff. But man, I look back over the last, especially like the last 4 years, and I've just experienced such a slow building, beautiful process of real, true healing. And, of course, that's not every single moment of every single day. And what I'm about to say next, I want to preface with, I don't regret my story. I don't wish that it would be different. I love what Jesus has done in my story, but it took me so long to even be able to really partner with Jesus in the healing and step out of being alone. Like, man, once I connected with you and with Finding Balance, I've had this question of, what if? The both and of, I am so grateful for my story. And I look back over these things and sort of the highlight reel that I just shared, and I have so much gratitude for what Jesus has done. And I also wonder, what if I had had this? What if I had had supportive community and somebody to walk alongside me and say, hey, I want to be with you and I want you to be with me, and we're glad to be here, whatever this looks like. And like, let's journey together. And here's some tools that I've learned. How much more accelerated could my freedom transformation have been? But yeah, I have that question. I have those things that I just wonder. And that's the highlight of the journey thus far, anyway.
Josi, thank you for, you really were transparent. Like, you modeled this well, because while this isn't technically a community, it's a podcast where lots of people are going to be hearing really difficult parts of your story. This isn't just a story. Like, this is, you lived these things. A lot of these things that you shared should not have happened. I just, in my mind, I'm like, why did that happen to her? I wrestle with that in my spirit of like, how could these things have happened? And they did. And I thank God that He was with you in His way, led you to find healing, even healing that's still occurring, and made a way, even though you weren't connected with Finding Balance for the eating stuff. Our eating issues very often span from, like, you're talking about, I'm a kindergartner and I saw myself in the mirror and I was filled with self-loathing and hatred and that I'm too large and all of these things. And I'm like,
yeah,
you would never have thought that if you weren't taught that, if that wasn't modeled. And grace for those who model, because we don't often know what we don't know. We don't know how damaging, and we don't realize the little eyes of the other eyes, whatever ages, who are watching. So thank you. I'm so deeply sorry for the things that you've experienced and the things you've gone through, and so thankful that you are willing to come here and share that part, to even set up of like, you've gone through these hard things and it was hard to show up and share. When you were sharing about all the different pieces that came into light, you had to do some therapy, you've researched, you've listened to podcasts, you've done all kinds of things, but showing up to therapy, showing up to a group, there is something that you have to do to get the benefit of what a therapist can help you with, a counselor. If you're in a prayer group, we have prayer groups. You have to show up. You have to somehow find the courage to click the Zoom link and join, whether your camera's on or off, whether you speak up or not, at least to even get there, or to get in your car and drive, or have someone drive you to therapy. Like, you have to show up first. And so I pause right here because I'm thinking, when you were sharing all those things, you showed up for yourself. You showed up because you believed that there's got to be freedom that's possible for you, or healing, even if you don't want to call it freedom, because freedom can look different to a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. But if we refer to it as the healing, like, I don't want to live this way. I don't want to be this way. I don't want this to be my life or my legacy. Like, I don't want to be known as the gal who tried every diet and failed at every diet because diets don't work, or whatever it is. You have to show up. So moving into someone who's like, okay, you know, I want this, and I physically, listening to this, feel terrified of the thought of showing up and being seen, showing up and being known. So where would you go from there? What would you want to say to help someone with that?
Yeah. You know, first off, if you're listening to this, I want to see you and give you a hug, tell you that you are not alone and there is space for you. And that's something that, you know, as facilitators of safe spaces, that's what we want to do, right? Is think about who is fighting the battle to even click the link. Who is terrified to even get in the car and open the door to whatever this space is, whatever the healing modality that they're entering into is. And we also have people come into these groups who are ready to, like, I'm ready to jump in, dive in. I don't care what I have to say or who I have to talk to or what I have to do.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm ready. When we have such a wide range, you know, as facilitators, we want to create spaces that, you know, create safety for all of that. And so, you know, that's kind of the place that I start with my mind as a leader. What kind of space am I creating and what kind of environment are we creating so that somebody knows that they have the freedom to simply show up?
Yes.
Am I communicating that, wow, you got here, and I have no idea what you had to go through to get here, what you had to sift through, and it might be really hard for you to even show up. So I want to communicate to you, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Good job. And I'm not going to force anything on you. I'm not even going to force you to receive anything that I think you need. In our church culture, even, I'm not even going to force prayer on you if that doesn't feel safe right now. And I want you to know that. I'm going to give you option and autonomy. And what that really boils down to is, I like the term gentle curiosity. That's not original to me, but I love it. I'm going to ask before I do anything or insert anything or advise anything or even ask, you know, a deep question. I'm going to ask if you even want to hear a question.
Yeah.
And if you don't, sweet, we'll do something else that does feel safe and cozy. That's my perspective is, you know, what are we doing on our end to say, hey, you're welcome. You showed up. Beautiful. You just want to be here and check it out and observe. Sweet. I'm not going to try and make your experience here be anything different than what it needs to be. And if we're really believing that people deserve that autonomy and deserve to, experience like self-awareness and grow in self-awareness, I'm going to give you the opportunity to trust that you know how much you need.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. When we were having our pre-production Zoom together, it came up where my background is so different than yours. I didn't walk through the same types of things that you've gone through. My church experience has been pretty good, like really good for 40 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I haven't known church to be a non-safe place. And so it's really heart shattering when I hear stories about problems like that, right? And so it's easy for me at times to just assume, hey, we're helping women find Jesus in the middle of their struggles with food. Come on and join us. If you want prayer, you don't have to pray.
Right.
Come on in and we will pray for you if you want that. I guess where I'm trying to go is I'm trying to be more mindful that not everyone, when they hear the name Jesus, even really knows what to expect. They don't know Jesus maybe in the way that I know him. Maybe something has happened that has corrupted their view and thoughts and feelings of church and Christians and what a safe space a church is designed to be and supposed to be. And so I think that really hearing the idea that, this gentle curiosity, you've modeled it with us, with our team, where we can be gently curious and ask gently curious questions with each other. And if somebody starts melting down, a lot of times it's me in those sessions because I feel so safe. I'll start really melting down and you give the permission of kind of, what do you need right now? You ask, do you just feel better by having shared? Do you want anyone to do anything? No, I feel good. We can keep going. Like now that's out because I've been carrying that for 2 weeks. Or do you want some prayer? Do you want some advice? Maybe I'm saying it wrong. Like you probably have better wording for it. But anyway, just to feel the freedom that the pressure's off. I can show up. It was hard for me to get here. I'm here. I'm listening. I'm absorbing. I'm trying to process it through the filter of this past that happened to me, good or bad, and take the next step, whatever that is.
What happens when somebody equates Jesus with the trauma?
Yeah.
That question comes up for me, even with what you're saying, with people entering the spaces and what you mentioned earlier. What happens when the messaging has been so solidified that, the amygdala of their brain knows that Jesus equals trauma? You can't just tell them not to believe that anymore. You can't just say, oh, no, the joy of the Lord is your strength. That's not going to work. And so, thinking of that and even offering you options, when we have like a skillful trauma-informed facilitation, what those options are to, explain a little deeper of what I've done with you is the offering different options talks to different needs that the brain might have while it's experiencing psychological pain. And so what's happening by offering different options is saying, hey, did you just need to say this? And thus your brain feels seen.
Yeah. Hey.
Do you want prayer around this right now? And thus caring for the brain's need to feel soothed. Do you want to hear any advice or any stories of when I was in a similar situation? Oh, now I'm giving you the option to feel like you have a little bit of, structure or security. We're touching on things that the brain needs to be able to feel healthy attachment. And as I say all of that, I also want to say that doesn't mean necessarily that groups with faith involved or otherwise are ineffectual if they don't have these things, or if they haven't been operating a certain way, that they're not as good or that healing can't happen. But if we're really looking at how to build secure attachment in the brain, some of these things that are required for trauma to really be healed on a biological level, we have to have some of those boxes checked off.
Yeah.
So there's the both and of that. And Jesus is going to work despite us in all of those spaces. So we're never going to do it perfectly. We're never going to be perfectly skilled facilitators as leaders. And if I screw it up, but Jesus has healing in store for this person. He is going to be able to hold what I don't hold well. Not that I don't strive for that, but I want to make sure I'm not communicating that there is only one right way to facilitate healing in groups of support or prayer or recovery or whatever.
For sure. And thank the Lord that he is capable enough to fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
Just like you said, the honey seeping down through those cracks that we don't even know are there. And so that's good. And you've talked about attachment. I know we've talked in other episodes, we've mentioned attachment. It's probably been explained, but someone's listening for the first time. What is attachment that you're talking about? And, attached to whom? Like, what does that look like?
So there's some Josiisms in how I describe some of these things. I like to be very visual, but at the base level, I think we can understand that attachment is like a bond or a connection that's created in your brain that meets the needs of your nervous system.
Okay.
So we talk about this a lot with, babies in formative years. That's where you see attachment discussed largely in a general sense and how important those early months are because a baby needs to see the face of their primary caregivers. And in seeing the smiling faces of their caregiver, their brain starts to form all of these bonds or attachments that lead to them feeling safe and seen and secure and soothed. And it's on all of those building blocks that our personalities are formed, our identities are formed. That's how we build resilience in a healthy pace is from the time when you're a baby and, you're experiencing some stress in I'm hungry or I need my diaper changed. And now I'm experiencing my caregiver, taking care of that problem. And, as a person ages, they can experience, more and more amounts of that stress because they're building resilience, the ability to, tolerate those amounts of stress and come back to who they really are because that's secure. But what happens either in childhood or, throughout our lives, we have belief systems or events or whatever that tells our brain the opposite story. And so while trauma, you can see like on a brain scan, if somebody has experienced psychological trauma, the brain can't distinguish between psychological and physical trauma. So it will store all of those things in a similar way. And that's not to say there's no hope, because through healing, we start to build what's called earned secure attachment. So maybe you haven't had attachment or some of those building blocks haven't been placed the way they needed to, or you didn't get a chance to feel seen as a child. And so now the rest of your personality is built on this shaky foundation because some of those most necessary pieces aren't there the way they need to be. There's still hope in that. We can still build that. We can still do that work. And in the right spaces, build these bonds in your brain that tell you that you're safe and you're loved and you belong. That's called building attachment. And when we bring that back to, online spaces or these groups, my perspective is that we want to build those relationships at the pace of building that attachment. And that's going to look different for each one of those people because they have different needs in their brain and their nervous systems, again, that they might not even be fully aware of.
So there's different rhythms, there's different skills and different applications, ways that we can do that. So like, for instance, if someone has been around Finding Balance or they discovered Finding Balance as an organization, maybe they've seen us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, social media somewhere, and have gone through our posts and get a feel for what we do, kind of who we are, what we believe. Maybe they go to our website or have listened to the Old School Food Freedom podcast or have, received the daily vitamin e-devotional that's free 5 days a week. There's all these different tools that someone may have been able to explore and get a feel for. Does that start creating some type of attachment, or is that separate? Is that totally different? Like, can you have an attachment to like an organization that can then lead you to take a next step to feel safe, to be in a community, a support group, a prayer group, something like that?
I would say that the opportunities through like the social media, the podcast, all of those things would be like the foyer to building attachment. Because once I fully enter into a Finding Balance group, then I am seeing and interacting with real life human beings to whom I can form attachment with. And of course, we're talking healthy attachment. We're not talking trauma bonding
Yeah.
or codependency or anything like that. But I would say that's like the introduction, that those interactions ask the question, could this be somebody, or could this organization represent somebody that I could feel safe with? I think it asks the question and opens the door to be able to step into the spaces, and in the spaces is where we really can do that deep relational work, because we've got to have that, the relational, personal interaction to really fully be immersed in attachment building practices.
Yeah. So you're driving through the neighborhood and you're seeing a lot of houses, and there's this one house and you're like, oh, this is lovely. I'm looking at the house. I like some of the things. They seem like maybe they have a little garden flag that resonates with you, and you eventually come to the front door, and we open the door and you come into, did you say it properly? The foyer? The foyer?
Foyer.
I don't know. I think it's
the
foyer.
First room.
The first room, the entry room.
Perfect.
That you come in, and so then it's like these steps that you take. It's kind of like exploring a church, if you feel God leading you to explore a new church home, but like to then come in and try a space that would offer compassion and caring and facilitators who aren't going to allow a group to stay in the pit. Like that is a struggle sometimes with a certain style of support group where you come in and you share your struggles and maybe some wins. But a lot of times it's more about I think you said something about, like we're in this muddy pit in your experience in the past, where it was a lot of people like being in a group together, but just kind of churning in the muck and not really getting anywhere. But our heart's desire at Finding Balance is to help you find Jesus in the middle of the pit, not force him on you, nothing like that. Like facilitate a safe space, and Jesus is there, and you know that you're seen and known, even if it's maybe you're not quite seen and known right away, but celebrated and loved and safe to be there.
Yeah, 100%. But makes me think of beach day. So I like to think of the visual as when somebody's entering a space, my desire for what the environment created would look like is like the perfect beach day. And if a group of us are all going to the beach, some people are taking off, stripping their towels and, overshirt off and everything as they run to the water so they can dive right in and cannonball and get right into the deep water. Other people in the group are going to want to come lay the towel down next to the water and maybe dip a toe in, but maybe have an awesome book and a big sun hat and just chill on the beach while other people are in the water. And you're going to have a range of people who are in between. And with a great beach day, we're good with whatever amount of immersion everybody else is in, because that's what's right for them. And some people may dive in the water and they might take a break and come sit on the beach, or some people may be on the beach and say, I think I want to get my feet wet, and now I'm ready to go back and sit on the beach. Are we okay with, and do we communicate that it's safe to be at all of those points? And conversely, I need to be asking myself, am I trying to force somebody who's reading a book on the beach to jump into the water and swim if that's not what they want to do? And do I have my own agenda or my own timeline that I want people to fit into? Because, especially in some of our faith spaces, we so badly want somebody to be healed, and we are so uncomfortable with them being in discomfort. We just want them to, snap, and now we're swimming and we're good and we're golden. But what work does God want to do in their timeline? God has his own timeline, his own agenda, and do they feel safe enough to have that experience with him? And these groups if we're talking faith spaces, it's not just about building earned, secure attachment with human beings. I have to experience earned, secure attachment to Jesus. And while he absolutely has the power to just create that bond immediately, it often doesn't happen that way. And there's so much beauty and like sacred gift in that process that we don't want to miss just because I want to avoid discomfort or I want to step out of discomfort quicker and I want them to experience a freedom from their discomfort quicker. There's so much beauty in the process, and I want a space that allows that process to take place while we're all glad to be together at the same time.
Yeah, that's so helpful to know we have permission for that. Like, we have permission to have that experience, and we can feel free to share as much as feels safe or to keep things that are between you and Jesus, keep them private. And if anyone were to try to keep pulling that out, you can say, this just feels right now like something that needs to stay between Jesus and I. I'm not ready. Like, we have permission. We have Christ-centered authority to consider what's being shared, what's coming out of our mouths and sharing, and when to share it and when not to share it. Some things just really may need to be between you and the Lord. And Jesus is the one who does all of this work. He does all the work. We're invited to join him in this work. And so that's why we show up and we have these prayer groups and Finding Balance. Our mission is to help women find Jesus in the middle of their struggles with food issues and body image. But it's not just only about the food and body, because there's so many things that maybe have caused us to turn that way anyway. But what does he have to say? And we are going to be having a new style of community that looks very much like this great way that you've described today. That is where we feel God leading us to launch that in 2025. So you can feel hopefully safe enough to try and to show up and see what it's like. But definitely stay tuned, because there's so much more that's going to be revealed with that. Is there anything you would want to wrap up before we get to our last question?
I think I would just say, and maybe it's a sense of giving yourself permission to do this, but start where you really are and not where you think you're supposed to be.
Oh, hey, that's powerful.
Yeah, girl.
Yes. Get it, because that's good.
If where you really are is on a beach towel, maybe dipping a toe in, start there. If where you really are is somewhere else, start there. Not where you think you're supposed to be. That's where Jesus wants to be with you, is where you really are. And he'll take it from there.
Real, raw, vulnerable, hot mess, all of it.
Unwashed.
Loves it. Oh, hey, let's talk about that. So I told Josi when she got onto Riverside, which is our recording studio, we got on there and I was like, listen, we're talking about feeling safe and seen and known in this space. And I purposely fought the urge to wash my hair, and it's up in a bun because this is day 5 unwashed hair with loads of dry shampoo.
Yes.
And I felt safe with her and I wanted to just show up like that. And she goes, hey, me too.
Yep.
And points to her hair. But you know what? That is real. That is what is kind of a game changer when you can be that way and feel safe to do that. I've shown up without makeup on and with tears running down.
Yes.
And you don't even know who Tammy Faye Baker is, but I got some listeners who know who she is. And with mascara, Tammy Faye Baker just running down the mascara down my face, crying, snot running out. It's fine. But you know what? That's why we have this deeper connection. Yeah. We've been there with each other. We've been down a little bit in the pit and we've come out of the pit together. And it's been wonderful. It's been so wonderful. You're just such a blessing, Josi.
Well, likewise. I just love this time together so much.
Yeah, me too. Hey, so to wrap it up, will you describe to us the last time you experienced true freedom or a time?
Yeah, I had to giggle at this one too, because what I want to say is something really bubbly and excited and like the fun kind of freedom. But what would be more honest is it is really hard for me to cry and not cover my face always. And we've had a lot of really hard things lately in our season. And a couple weeks ago, I was so aware of the fact that I was able to connect, and it was online, with a newer and very dear friend of mine. And I was devastated over some very real loss we've experienced lately. And I was able to weep And I never once felt like I needed to cover my face.
Wow.
I never would have thought even online that would be possible, but let alone at all. You know, even with my husband sometimes, like I still will try to cover my face with my shirt if I'm just broken. And what a gift that is to be broken, uncovered with somebody that we're safe with. So like that one has been
Fully seen.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So good.
That's awesome. Josi, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you. Friends, if you would like to connect with Josi, look for links in the show notes. We also will mention our verses that were talked about. I think the John 10:10, I can remember that one. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to the Old School Food Freedom Podcast. For over 20 years, Finding Balance has been helping people walk in freedom by discovering where Jesus fits into their struggles with food and body image. If you want more biblical truth and encouragement, head on over to FINDINGbalance.com and subscribe to our free daily vitamin devotional. While you're there, explore our Christ-centered Lasting Freedom online course and small group tools. You can help keep this ministry going by donating today at FINDINGbalance.com. See you next time. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose, treat, or prescribe a particular course of action. If you have or suspect you may have an eating disorder, please consult your healthcare provider. If you desire to receive faith-based care, visit ChristianTreatmentFinder.com to browse professionals with a Kingdom campaign against eating disorders.